The Supreme Court's latest order, what many people consider to be the biggest order of this term, seems like it's blowing up in their face, but maybe they put a poison pill in it for themselves. So the big headline, the Supreme Court stops nationwide injunctions, making a pathway for Trump to overrule birthright citizenship in the Constitution. Everybody rightfully panicking because that's a bad freaking headline. But when you dig deeper into the Supreme Court ruling, as I said, whether they intentionally poison pilled their own ruling, or you could just say they kept it narrow, or you can say that because of the fact that it wasn't written all that tight, however you want to describe it, groups are finding ways around it already. So the Supreme Court order drops regarding nationwide injunctions and how this court couldn't issue a nationwide injunction on birthright citizenship, kind of. Well, I'll get into that in a moment. And then groups started saying, aha, here's how you get around it right away. And what the Supreme Court said as you dig deeper is really that just like random individuals and nonprofit groups and plaintiffs that are not states and individual plaintiffs don't have the right to get nationwide injunctions just by being an individual brings the lawsuit. Ben's injured, Ben files a lawsuit, Ben asks for nationwide injunction, Ben can't get nationwide injunction anymore. Simple as that. However, if you are a state, and people are in states, although who knows when the Supreme Court says that corporations are people, we'll see whatever. Anyway, but states have the right to get nationwide injunctions. So a lot of the cases, though, involving birthright citizenship involve states seeking the injunction. So if states seek the injunction, in theory, the nationwide injunctions should stay in place. And also the Supreme Court didn't preclude class actions seeking in nationwide injunctive relief. So what that kind of means is if this was an individual case, Ben sues, wants nationwide injunction. No, you can't do that anymore, which everyone thought you could do before. What does Ben do? I don't mean to sound Trumpy. I'm just trying to give it a description there. I amend the complaint that says Ben, on behalf of himself and all similarly situated people, court, I'm amending it. And then Trump goes, no, you can't do that. And I go, oh, I just did. Now it's a class action and I can get nationwide injunction relief. That's what a group did right away. Harry Litman, a group called CASA Inc., the Asylum Seeker Advocacy Project, and other groups. They just said, we're seeking class action status right now. And they said, without a class-wide injunction, defendants will deny thousands of babies in the punitive class their constitutional and statutory right to United States citizenship, as well as all of the rights and privileges that the citizenship entails. So, Harry, maybe start off giving the contours of this decision, because this decision freaked a lot of people out, rightfully so, and then explain the way people are outmaneuvering, or maybe that's what the Supreme Court intended in the first place.
Yeah. So first, it is freaking a lot of people out. I'm not sure I would say, Ben, rightfully so. And I don't think you'd have had the freak out factor, but for it arising in what in the next iteration of the case would have to do with birthright citizenship, but this had nothing to do with it. So it was kind of quizzical to me that Sotomayor came out of the box with this terrible, really plaintive dissent, and doesn't use respectfully again, about birthright citizenship, which really wasn't there. As you say, it turns into a really sort of complicated, arcane deal, and creative plaintiffs groups have had no trouble turning on a dime, and I mean a dime today. I know of two already to say, okay, so we can't get the nationwide injunction, but we want to get the class action. By the way, on the nationwide injunction, let me give you a counter hypothetical, which is your name is Donald, and you want to get a nationwide injunction on mifepristone, so you find a way to get to Judge Kaczmarek in Texas, and you get it. So there's an upside to not being able to have a single judge do it. On the other hand, there's a downside that the court was wrestling with at its argument and doesn't really solve of what happens if the administration knows it has a lousy case on its hands. And so it doesn't appeal all the way up. It just does this one, then this one, then this one. But let's talk about class actions, because you're totally right. And by the way, Justice Alito has a concurring opinion telling district courts, don't just let them get the same result by using class actions, but it's hard to know how we'll stop them. But class actions themselves, Federal Rule 23, have this sort of 4-part test. And at least in the past, you saw district courts and definitely the higher courts kind of reining them in, making it not so easy. You've done them. I've done them. You have to show things like commonality. And so I do think that's going to be the absolute go-to strategy. But I think we will have a uneven application of it in the district courts. So what we're going to get out of this is basically what I predicted, which is a mucky, murky, general sense. Well, don't give nationwide injunctions, but what happens in its stead is going to be for district courts to try their best to figure out. You'll see things that are inconsistent. This issue, even, and I don't mean the birthright citizenship, which will come back, but this issue of how you bind and get relief for people other than the plaintiff that's in front of the court, it's going to come back, and the courts are going to work it out, and it's going to be messy, etc. But you are right. If nationwide injunctions are out, if you state the right kind of class, wide class, Ben and everyone else similarly situated, that's not, you have to be a little bit more precise than that, but you can get to the same spot, and we're going to see group after group try to do exactly that.
Messy, messy, messy,
yes.
And not the football or soccer player. Why is the Supreme Court continuing to make these rulings that wreak havoc on the district courts and the ability to have decisions that have parity? I mean, they're throwing their own system into absolute, chaos. To your point, what are you going to do now? You're going to have, whereas normally you can have a nationwide injunction, which eventually finds its way to the Supreme Court anyway. It'll go up through the circuit courts. Maybe there's a circuit court split on this idea, and it works its way up to the Supreme Court on these issues. That's what we saw happen in a lot of these cases. There'd be, take Biden, for example. There would be a judge like a Kaczmarek on an issue of mifepristone. He'd issue a nationwide injunction blocking mifepristone. Then you'd have a judge appointed by a Democrat, if you from Washington State, issue an injunction saying, yes, people can have mifepristone. You'd have conflicting rulings. Then it would work its way up to the Supreme Court. In the meantime, the status quo was preserved, in this case, birthright citizenship, in the other case, mifepristone being allowed. And the Supreme Court could hear it. And the Supreme Court has been making horrible decisions, but they can then make the decision really on the merits of the underlying issue. In this case, the birthright citizenship, in that case, mifepristone, versus dealing with, these procedural tea leaves that you have to read. And then, okay, in Kentucky, there's not a nationwide injunction. So if you're born in Kentucky from immigrant parents, am I a citizen? I don't know. What if I travel to California? Am I a citizen now? Because the district court judge there. So it just creates this complete and utter mess and chaos, and authoritarians thrive in that chaos.
They do. And this is so I think that some of the press here is going to be overheated because of the dissent. But you can't, this is what the Trump administration asked for, and this is what they got. And, these last couple weeks, and really with one or two very, very, very important exceptions, this is a Supreme Court that all term long, and in stark contrast to the district courts, have really given the administration almost everything it asked for. And then this point that you made, Ben, I think is very telling. So just last week, district court says in a case coming out of Boston, the judge went too far and we're not going to enter his order. And this was a case where the judge got totally jerked around, lied to, really confabulations by the administration. One of the things you think of as a Supreme Court doing is, they got judges' backs. And this seems to be a term where they don't have judges' backs. I've been saying from the start, there's the focus in the media on, is it a Dem appointee or Republican? Is it Trump or someone else? And I've been saying what we really need to keep our eye on in addition to that is district court versus appellate court. And when you get to the courts of appeals, and especially the Supreme Court, this whole term, the uber conservative 6-person majority has really more or less had its way and has given many, many individual victories to the administration, even if on the single thing that seemed to matter most to me, and it still does, they didn't. They said 7-2 or 9-zip. You don't have unreviewable deference here.
I'll make one final point, though, because I think Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent is getting a lot of attention, and a lot of people are saying you're being very hyperbolic and how extreme. And Amy Coney Barrett, who wrote the majority, said that as well. And I've seen a narrative. Whoa, Justice Jackson, what do you do? That's not what they're saying. Well, that's what Donald Trump is saying, right? When Donald Trump got the order, he said, I won. There's no
Excellent point. Yeah.
There's no birthright citizenship. I'm going after the president of the United States. Took that ruling and within 20 minutes held a press conference on Friday and said, I'm coming after people who think they're citizens based on birthright citizenship. I'm coming after you. He said that. And he said that in a press conference. So her concerns that an executive branch wants to do that, is justified, and perhaps what the Supreme Court should have done, instead of playing this game of possum, or I don't even know if that's the expression that I'm trying to use here, but basically go to the merits then. And let's say, okay, let's provide clarity. My wife is here from birthright citizenship. My daughter was here from, by proxy, half from birthright citizenship here. So, I'm just telling you, in my own family, my wife woke up today and she's like, what does that mean for me? Well, and that's how a lot of Americans feel. So Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is channeling what Americans feel. And, people could say, we don't like your feelings, but that's how we feel. I'll give you.
So that's true. That I agree on, and that's why you're going to have such focus on this decision. Even as I think 2 or 3 others that came down today are more consequential.
Everybody subscribe. Talk about those in another hot take. Everybody subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube, the Talking Feds podcast, and the Talking Feds Substack. I had to put the 3 up quickly, otherwise it looks like loser. But this is a incredible channel, and it's where I get my legal news from. So everybody subscribe. Thanks, Harry.
Hey, thanks, Ben.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.